Update 35 preview combat changes. Greetings, it's almost time for the next update, and that means it's time to share some of the reasoning behind the upcoming big shakeups. This update brings a massive slew, ooh, of balance adjustments all at once to hopefully reduce the need of large, sweeping changes in subsequent updates, since some seemingly minor changes affect a huge part of the game's combat. Okay, so already I'm a little concerned because if small changes affect a huge part of the game's combat, what's going to happen when we have a massive slew of changes? Okay. The main focuses in Update 35 are twofold: improving accessibility to the game's combat by increasing the duration of outgoing ability effects, such as damage over time, buffs, and debuffs, okay, and a continuation of the attempt to quell some of the obscene damage production at the high end. Let's start by breaking apart some of the fundamental realities of ESO today. Uh-oh. This whole letter scares me. Oh. Okay. Weaving. Oops, too far. Certainly, to be truly effective in ESO's combat, you need to learn to manipulate something that is known as weaving, which refers to the act of squeezing multiple actions into the global cooldown window. Doing so drastically increases your agency and output, and it is a staple of the game that we've come to embrace, as it helps our combat feel different and exciting to participate in once you learn the ins and outs. For those who don't know, light attack weaving is basically when you do a light attack in between each of your abilities. The abilities have a cooldown, but that cooldown is not shared with the light attack weave. Or it's not shared with the light attack cooldown. However, the impact of weaving leads to a massive gap in performance where players who cannot interact with it as effectively are left miles behind those who can. While this is partially unavoidable and an important part of what makes the mastery of ESO or any activity utilizing a similar system particularly satisfying, we want to do what we can to shorten that delta. The closer the gap between the low and high end, the easier it is to create content that can accommodate a wider audience, while making more natural progression points for those looking to improve. To this end, we've started to look at the impact that one of the most common and important forms of weaving has in ESO, light and heavy attack weaving. I'm already scared. Coming in Update 35, we're reducing light and heavy attacks' impact and damage production by adjusting their damage to deal a flat amount regardless of stats. Oh. We have spent a considerable amount of time investigating the baseline experience that a new player would have with these attacks, using that as our starting point for how much damage they do moving forward. The aim is to not harm the low-end experience and target only the higher end. In doing so, we hope to reduce the difference of damage potential in a way that retains the satisfaction of learning to weave, where the impact is still felt, but to a much less degree than before. So some of the content they've created, if they nerf damage that bad, are we going to even be able to clear some of this content? For reference, in many of ESO's high-end experiences and activities, the average build sees roughly 15 to 20% of their overall damage coming from light attacks alone, which is a huge contribution to the delta of power we see. While testing these adjustments internally, we've seen a reduction of 6 to 11% overall damage, which allows for a much smaller and healthier gap, while still retaining the sense of mastery and expression of that mastery with weaving. With this adjustment, we'll also be making a significant number of changes to item sets, passives, and buffs to ensure classes remain balanced in damage production, while also trying to do a better job allowing builds to amplify these actions. We've heard your cries, heavy attack build lovers, and we want better for you, without introducing unhealthy gameplay between PvE and PvP. Yeah, light attack weaving is usually one of your top damage dealers. If it's not the first 3 on your damage, you can probably do better. Combat effects. The other area we have spent a considerable amount of time on for this update is the uptime of effects in ESO, as these are another huge way to improve your combat abilities. Outside of weaving, the main limiter of your effectiveness in combat is your ability to output events, such as damage, healing, shielding, etc., which is bound by activating abilities, which in turn are bound within the global cooldown system. Activating an ability from your action bar locks out your other abilities for 1 second, so a way to circumvent the system is to utilize actions that add power or extra events without your need to continuously activate them. These are often seen as buff and debuff abilities or damage and healing over time abilities. Keeping as many of these abilities up as long as possible drastically improves your combat potential, creating another area of mastery and potential of power deltas. So basically, what this is saying, as I'm reading it, is what we typically do when we create a rotation is we drop down dots, our damage over time first. So you might do shards or endless hail or something like that. And then once all of those are in place, while those timers are ticking down, then you do a spammable, something that you can do once every second. And as the damage over times drop off, you reapply them. And by stacking those things, we increase our damage. So when you have a newer player who is just spamming one ability, they are losing out on potential damage over time abilities that would stack with that and triple their damage. Isbeth says, if the fight is going to be longer, groups will have to focus not so much on DPS, but now player upkeep viability and crowd control. But there are some fights where you have to do something in a particular amount of time. And if you do not get that done in a particular amount of time, the boss enrages or another effect happens. Now, will these cuts be enough to cause groups not to be able to do that? I don't know. Currently, many of these abilities fall within a 10-second window, meaning to maximize your efficiency, you must activate them once every 10 seconds. With 10 total active ability slots at your disposal, this often creates a situation where you want to load up almost every slot with one of these abilities, adding to your combat output for each duration-based effect you utilize. Between this and the engagement of weaving, this creates a reality where high actions per minute, APM, is required to be effective, as well as a robust rotation to keep as many of these effects up as possible. This in turn reinforces a need to glue your eyes to your action bars, taking you out of the action happening on screen. This sounds very much like Todd Howard with his minimap hatred. Now he's concerned that we're focusing on our action bar. While this can create exhilarating combat experiences where you need to constantly monitor different activities on screen, it can also be overwhelming and particularly challenging for you to do so at the rate required to be effective. As such, coming in Update 35, we are increasing the duration of many of these effects in game, primarily damage over time, buffs, and debuffs. By extending the duration, we hope to reduce the stress of many combat rotations, allowing for you to focus more on the action in front of you rather than the action of juggling buffs and debuffs on your ability bar and making the game far more accessible. I thought sometimes, yes, the boss is unbeatable if they do that. Sometimes it is an automatic wipe. An example, and again, I don't know that this amount of damage would cause that, particularly because this trial is a little bit older. But if you've ever run Cloud Rest, a group of people has to go downstairs, and they have to be able to damage down crystals and run things across the board and do so in a certain amount of time, or the entire group upstairs wipes. I don't understand the point of closing the gap if we're not rescaling difficulty. They may have to, but we know that that's probably going to be reactionary, right? They're going to do this, something's not going to be completable, even by the elite, and they're going to have to rescale the difficulty. Yeah, so all dots and buffs and debuffs sound like they're going to last longer. VAA hard mode 2. Totally, we're better attention if we're playing ESO while driving, right? Whip Mother and the last boss in regards to time. Wisp Mother? Yeah. Can anybody else think of examples of things that you have to get done in a certain amount of time? I'm not as worried about VAA. If we drop damage even by half of what it is now, because that content is so old, we'll still be able to clear. Right, is DPS combat going to be boring now? Or how many people have spent hours on a combat dummy to get to the point where they are top of the elite? And now that's all going to be gone. Image, not necessarily, because it might offset some sustain issues. But if you could drop a dot every 5 seconds, and now it's every 10, it's just one less button click. You're still going to do the same amount of damage. If something that does 200 damage every second, well, it should be more than that. But anyway, if something does X damage every second, it's still going to do X damage every second, whether it lasts 4 seconds or 20. It doesn't really matter. Unless it has a burst at the beginning or end, which some of them do. I'm not top or elite, but I've definitely spent a lot of time working on my rotation to get it down. Right. Are you going to feel like that time was wasted if they decrease the damage of light attacks and increase your duration of dots so you don't have to... Essentially, you don't have to do your duration, or your rotation. You'll do a quick rotation. My guess. You'll do a quick rotation. Then you'll have your spammable. And instead of doing that for 3 seconds, you'll do that for 10. And then you'll go back to your rotation. And then you'll spam for 10 seconds, etc., etc. And I'm making up numbers because I don't know. My casual guild has trouble clearing halls of fabrication during the final burn phase. Yep, that's another one. Okay, let's keep reading. Since many of these effects currently add a tremendous amount of power per cast over their duration, simply increasing their duration would merely inject a significant amount of power into the game, where this is already in excess. To combat this, we're adjusting many of these values to account for their increased duration. Okay, so there's the answer to your question. They're gonna nerf the skill but make it last longer. There will be overall increase of effectiveness per cast while reducing their effectiveness per second while active. This should reduce the ceiling potential of many builds while improving their baseline experiences, where many players will have an easier time keeping these effects active. In simpler terms, we're reducing the damage potential for these abilities per second while increasing their total output overall. Yeah, more bosses will enrage. That doesn't necessarily make the content unbeatable, but it's certainly going to create a different kind of gap, honestly. So now instead of worrying about our DPS, we're going to worry more about placement of our characters, etc. And sometimes that's harder. Mel salty. You don't want another PvP dot meta. Okay. For example, previously a damage over time effect would deal 1.5 times the damage of a spammable attack, such as surprise attack, over its duration of 10 seconds. Okay, now we're getting into math and people are going to start tuning out, right? Or 0.15 relative damage per second. Now damage over time effects will deal 2 times the damage of a spammable attack over its duration of 20 seconds. Increasing its damage per cast while reducing its relative damage per second to 0.1. So they are nerfing damage a lot. It's not just light attacks. They're going to nerf all of our damage by way more than 15%. In accordance with this, many healing overtime effects will have their values adjusted to ensure they do not overperform when compared to damage over time. Okay, while still being impactful in PvP environments. Here's my concern. So now we're going to have reduced damage, and it sounds like a lot of reduced damage. So we're going to have enraged bosses, but we're also reducing healing. Kayla says, sounds like a bunch of people didn't really want to work to get their DPS up. I don't know if this is the best solution, but I guess we'll see. Yeah. Rotations will change. Dump dots, heavy attack for more resources. We won't need resources, though. I think we'll still have a light attack build. But if you're only casting half the skills, unless they raise the cost, you're going to have sustain easy. Is this going to be more fun even on the low end? I don't know. But I think we need to go into PTS. Here's my Discord link, guys. If you guys would like to go into PTS when this comes out and test a trial or a dungeon, let's get a group together. Let's get a group together. Okay. Both areas required an extensive pass of existing class ability and passive power to ensure they remain balanced with one another afterward. As such, the PTS patch notes will have a sizable amount of number tweaking. Okay, so yes, of course, Vet. So what I'm saying is they don't really know what the numbers are going to look like. So when we do get to PTS, we should not freak out right away. We should freak out towards the end of the PTS cycle, not the beginning. So while I am also scared, I'm going to urge you guys to give it a chance and wait and see how they tweak it. They say this will take several quarters to sort. Okay, let me finish reading then. We recognize this will create a lot of changes in how you optimize your builds and how you play them, but it is our hope that by the end of the transition to these standards, the game will be more enjoyable and accessible to everyone. After these adjustments are live, we are going to focus on any resulting balance issues for the next few updates, hopefully reducing the chaotic nature of change for a brief period after the initial turbulence. We'll be keeping a close eye on the discussions that come out of this, as well as the initial feedback over the upcoming PTS cycle. Since the scale of these changes is large in nature, please understand it may take more time for adjustments to come, since changing one standard affects many specific abilities. We hope this helps provide some clarity of our goals with the upcoming changes you'll see, and aids embracing yourself for the number of changes coming as well. We know this is never an easy process, and we appreciate your patience and tolerance as we try to improve the game that you and we love. May your roads lead you to pleasant journeys, and we look forward to seeing you in Tamriel. These changes are all part of the Update 35 base game patch and will be free for all ESO players. No purchase necessary. They give a link to the forums, and this will be testable come July 11th, which is next Monday. Dot builds will kill the 1-bar builds. I'm guessing. Okay, guys. So, what do you like and dislike about what we're reading? You like nothing. So I do housing for the next year while Zos sorts everything out. Pretty much. I can see where they're going with closing the gap. But they're going to have to change some of the difficulty of the content, I would think. Yeah, I think it'll take a year to get this sorted too. To me, it seems they're sacrificing vet hardcore players for new players, casual players. I haven't been in ESO long, but I hope it doesn't hurt too much. We'll try and see all I can do. Yeah, I mean, these changes are going to happen with or without us, right? So we all love ESO. We're going to give it a chance. Feel free to give it a chance with me on PTS, like I said. But yeah, this is going to be ouch. So they're going to reduce damage over time. They're going to make it longer so you don't have to cast it as often. So you're going to have less to do, which means more spamming. You're spammable, right? Light attacks and heavy attacks are going to be worth less. It's going to take us longer to kill stuff, which means we're going to have more enraged bosses, but they're also nerfing healing. I don't know. I get that, Brian. We've been told to be patient for a long time. I know. I know. You have trouble with your hands, I'll have to load my dots and bar swap more often, which is difficult for me. You shouldn't, though, if they make the dots last longer. You should actually have fewer bar swaps than you do now. I do like that they're trying to make raids more accessible, but it does feel like they're hurting the light attacks a lot, and it's already hard enough to make a light attack build. Yeah, that's a big question. Are we going to have interesting, challenging, hard end content, or is it just going to feel like everything is tanky and long fights? More grind. I will say we should probably all be focusing on sticker book because a lot of builds are going to change, which means I bet a lot of gear is also going to change. Particularly if you have any gear currently that focuses on light attacks at all. We should probably be working on sticker book because who knows, and they're going to make set changes too, so who knows what's going to be powerful, right? Nobody thought Medusa was going to mount anything, but look what happened. It also makes it feel like Wolf is getting nerfed to the ground. Oh, true. Light attacks for Werewolf. Yep. I feel like these PvP survival builds are going to dominate until these changes get worked out properly. That's probably true. That is probably true. So watch for that if you're a PvPer. But a year from now, we will forget about all this and it will be the new norm, just like all the other MMO changes. Lots of griping and then forgotten over time. I don't know. I feel like ESO has been losing some players. A lot of the endgame players that I know have left. I know a lot of PvPers left. I don't know that this is going to bring that back. I think, if anything, it's going to push more of those players out. If it takes some of the challenge out, people are going to get bored. And that's one of the things that has made ESO phenomenal, is there is no, like, ceiling, really, on what you can do. So I'll be curious to see what happens. I'm going to give it a chance, though. You know, a lot of players who played because they enjoyed this brand of content. Yeah, exactly. You'll never forget. A lot of great players in your guilds have left to play Elden Ring. I've seen that too. I've seen that too. And everybody's just waiting for the next MMO to drop. So if we do get a decent MMO, could be trouble. Well, let's test it out on PTS. Let's see what this actually looks like in practice. And we know it's going to change. They're probably going to do too much of a nerf. We're probably going to have the elite players go in and try to do something like the newest trial, Dreadsail Reef, and not be able to clear it. And then they're going to have to tweak it again, right? So I'm curious about it. This will be active on PTS on Monday. Monday the 11th. This is a massive change. A year from now, they will still be fixing this. This is a much different change than what we normally complain about. This is true. This is a huge, huge change. Admo, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. That's fine, Admo. Thank you. I know awesome guilds that have trouble clearing the neutron now. Exactly. We've only just recently gotten world first, right? I'd be curious to see how that same group that's gotten world first does post change or in PTS. Okay. All we can do is see. Leave a comment below if you have anything to add, and let's continue this conversation. I'll see you next time.